Hi and welcome to another episode of PDA Dad UK. In this episode I'm going to be looking at the concept of the 5 love languages. Now this is something I've alluded to in some previous episodes and I wanted to take a closer look at. And the reason I wanted to take a closer look is that often understanding the expressions of love we receive from particularly autistic kids, I find, is very different from the love that neurotypical people would be able to express and the way they express it. But when you actually boil it down to the 5 love languages, we can then see it far more clearly. To give a bit of background on it, the 5 love languages was a concept written about by a guy called Gary Chapman. He's a Christian author, and whilst the roots of this all come from that Christian resource, it's something that permeates religion, in my opinion. And when you actually boil it down to the 5 elements and the 5 different languages that there are, it makes sense regardless. And he uses it in relationship counselling and dealing with the relationship breakdowns that can occur and how to look for love in each other and how to express love back in a way that's recognised. It's well worth looking at regardless of what your beliefs are, because it is really helpful stuff, and it's really helpful for being able to show your love to other people in whatever way. And it's certainly something that I think I've learned I can use with my daughter, because I can show her I love her without having to say the words or put her in a comfortable situation. She recognises it from my actions, and you'll see that as we go into it in more detail. So I'm going to go through the 5 love languages, and I'll put up some links at the end to the website that this sort of comes from, and Gary Chapman has a bunch of books which I highly recommend reading, but the one specifically on the 5 love languages, as I say, regardless of your religious disposition, they're really worth having a look at because they are just so insightful from that perspective. So let's have a look at the 5 love languages. So, in his book on the 5 love languages, Gary Chapman discusses the fact that we have a primary and a secondary love language. And everybody will do this. And it's akin to, if you like, having 2 spoken languages. So my first language is English. Now, if I were to have a secondary language, which I don't, but if I were to speak French, for example, that would be my secondary language. It's not my primary. It's not something I don't think in French. I wouldn't, act in French. However, when it needs to be, I recognise it and I can communicate in it. So we all have that going on in some way or another. And how we communicate our love language is how we're showing love. So we may do, and we tend to communicate our primary love language as being our way of expressing love to others. So for me, my primary love language is words of affirmation. And I can say to people, oh, you're doing a great job there, you're doing a great job there, that's fantastic. When I was working in an office, it was a really good way of encouraging people and giving praise for the good things that are done, and then obviously needing to deal with things if they were needing to be dealt with. But I could always shape it by using positives and being genuine about that, because that is my love language. I enjoy receiving words of affirmation. And so to give them back to somebody else is my natural way of showing appreciation back, showing that kind of love back to someone. I want my daughter to know how much I love her, and it's a really difficult thing when it comes to autistic kids. Sometimes they don't process things in the same way as a neurotypical person like myself does, and that can get in the way of that love being interpreted and understood. The best example I can give of that is that a love language that just isn't on my daughter's radar really is acts of service. And we're going to go in and explain what the 5 languages are in a moment, but for her, acts of service just doesn't factor into her communication of love at all. So, if I were to go and clean her room and tidy it up and make it look nice, that's just something I should be doing as a dad to her. It doesn't register as that's me expressing my love to her in any way. And so it's really important that I recognise what her love languages are, so that I can then communicate back to her in a way that she understands and that she gives love herself, that it's being given back to her and she recognises it as an act of love. So let's go into what the 5 love languages are, and we can sort of discuss them in more detail. So the first love language is, I'm going to start with, is actually my own primary love languages, which is, as I've mentioned already, words of affirmation. So this is where it's words of praise, it's words of encouragement. When I've done a good job, I like to hear from people that I've done a good job. If someone comes to me and says, "Oh, Dunk, you're doing a great job with this, you're doing a great job with that," I really appreciate it. It comes back on me and I feel bolstered by it, and I feel appreciated by the people who are giving it to me, giving me that affirmation. It makes me feel a sense of value. And it's the way I communicate my love back to people. I will say things. I will say, "You're doing good." I will say to my wife, "You're beautiful." I will say to my kids, "You're awesome." One of the things I often say is, "You're the best." And I want them to recognise that. That's how I feel about them. They are the best thing in my life. My family is number one, and they are a gift to me, and I express that vocally. And when they come back to me and say, "I love you, Daddy," or if they just say something like, "Daddy, I really like this about you," my daughter will come up to me often and say, "You're the best daddy in the world." She'll tell me I'm the worst in the next breath, but when she says that, it really bolsters me. It really lifts me up and makes me feel really valid to her. And of course, naturally, I express that back in whatever way I can. And those sort of things, they're really close moments that I have with my daughter, because that's me appreciating my love language being reflected back to me and being able to then show it in the same way to my daughter. And likewise, it's when you have a word that if someone's got something critical to say, it has the opposite effect. So I feel that if somebody has, "I'm really not happy with you on this one, Doug," I will really feel it. It can ruin my day. So when you're communicating with your kid, if you're giving really positive feedback, and that's their love language that they're recognizing, you're going to bolster them. But by the same token, and this certainly happens with a lot of autistic kids, when you're critical, they can take it in a really negative way. And that can lead to things like meltdowns. That can lead to upset and meltdowns, shutdowns, whatever the case may be, however your child responds. So it's really good to recognize that. So if your child has a love language, their primary love language is words of affirmation, being aware that the flip side of that coin is that criticism is going to be really poorly received. It means that you can work with that. So techniques like, they call it sugarcoating sometimes, but it's often used in business, the idea of wrapping a criticism into positives. So you're doing a fantastic job. If she's trying to learn to draw something, knowing to say, "Wow, look at that, you've done that really well, haven't you? Look at how you've structured they can really see that. Over here, maybe you could try this, maybe draw some feathers on the bird or something like that, but look at that as well, you've done that really well." She will take the negative better on the basis that I've shown it around with 2 positives that are wrapping it. So I'm starting with the positive, ending with the positive, and just giving something constructive in the middle, trying not to make it a negative thing, but a suggestion that she might want to take on board. It's a really tricky thing, but it's really worth doing if that primary love language is words of affirmation. So now we come on to my wife's primary love language, which is quality time. So quality time is basically exactly what it sounds like. It's the time that you're spending with someone. My wife loves to have our evenings where we can sit down and it's just her and me, the kids are asleep, and we get that quality time together. And it don't even have to be discussing stuff, just the fact that we're in the presence of each other, and it's encouraging to her. She responds to it, and that's how I can show my wife my love for her, is that I spend that quality time. And if I don't do it enough, I notice the effects it has. It's really, really important, and I need to recognize that more. I need to be more productive in that. Likewise, if you've got a child, that quality time, and my daughter certainly this would factor into, it's probably her secondary love language, but she often wants to have family time. She certainly likes to have time alone with my wife, and to a lesser degree with myself. She will have that alone time. One of the ways that I often, if I sense that there's been a lot of tension, is to say we're going to have a bit of a family day. or a daddy-daughter day, and I can just take her out and we'll do something together, and it's a really good way of bonding in that sense. I can wrap into that her primary love language, so while we're out and about I can tell her, I'm really proud of you and I love you loads. And she can recognise that. But it's a really good way of bolstering that relationship and cementing that trust that she has with me, and it's something that I love those days. So, you know, they're always magical when I've had a chance to just spend alone time with my daughter like that. They don't happen often enough, but it really makes a difference. And it makes a difference in how we relate to each other when it comes to having to deal with things like meltdowns and having to deal with things like the everyday of life. If we've got that relationship working properly, she responds much better. The third love language that we're going to look at is gift giving. And this is my mother-in-law's forte. Her primary love language from everything I've seen is gift giving. Whenever she comes to visit, she comes with bags of gifts to give to especially the kids. But you can see that's really her way of communicating her appreciation and her love. And she does it. They're always thoughtful gifts. They're always clever gifts. They're always something that she knows the kids will really respond to. She'll often put something educational in there or something that she thinks might help to develop an area or something like that. But again, that's her showing her desire to see them succeed and to improve with that. And it's a really wonderful thing. And so it's really important to me sometimes to know I need to make sure, even if it's something small, that we're giving something back that can be recognised to say, you know, we really appreciate you as well, we love you as well. And they don't have to be big things. It's just the token and the effort that goes into it is something that you can see she responds to. And it's because, as with all the love languages, the best way to assess what someone's love language is to just observe how they operate and how they live. And if somebody's giving out a lot of gifts to people, it's just a natural way of showing that's what their primary love language is, and that's a way that you can respond to show that. So for kids, my son's quite good with this. He'll often sort of bring, you can have this, Daddy. If he's got some sweets, he'll always share them. He'll always want to hand them around, and he really responds to that. So that gift giving thing's, you know, definitely in there. Next love language I want to look at is acts of service. But it's one that, when you get your head around it, is really valuable to know, and it's something that you can very easily address, and it's something that you'll see with kids. It's in those little things. If they're tidying up their room and they come down and say, hey, I tidied my room, that's to them an act of service. If they're doing things which are constantly showing their appreciation by just taking care of the little things, maybe they like getting up and making a cup of tea for you in the morning. It's those little things. In a romantic relationship, it would be things, just taking note of those little things, like does your wife have sugar in her tea? Making sure that that's been put in, or that it's there available. Doing those little things that can add up to a big effect in how someone's receiving the love. And if you've got somebody who's always doing those little things for you, if you're coming home and the house is tidy and clean, that's a good sign that you know, acts of service is something that is high up there in their love languages. And with kids, it can be, I got you the biscuits you like today. I made you your favourite dinner. I got you the little toy that you sort of wanting all this time. And it's not, you know, that could be gift giving, but the way it also works is that it's an act of service, because you're actually paying attention to the little detail. It's not just that it's a gift, it's that it's a gift that's being thoughtful. If you've got a kid who's often wanting to do those little extra things, I'll take out the trash tonight, I'll make sure the bags have gone out. I will do, you know, whatever it takes to just make those little things better. If they want to lay the table, if they want to do the washing up after dinner, if they're doing those little things, and it'd be a miracle if my kids did any of that, but in those things, that's their love language to you. So being able to reflect that back, and it's taking care of those other little things, those little acts of service that show your appreciation for them, get read back as this is love being reflected back to me. So the final love language to look at is physical touch, and this is one that's so important with kids anyway. There's plenty of statistics around that show that babies that are cuddled a lot and young kids that are cuddled a lot grow up with a far more established sense of security and sense of well-being, because they've had that physical touch early on. Some people, my dad's not a touchy-feely person at all, but when I was a kid he gave me loads of cuddles, but as I grew up that became less and less, because that's just not his love language at all. But being able to show that physical touch, and it can be in different ways as well. If you've got a friend who's, their primary love language is physical touch, it doesn't have to be going up and necessarily giving them a hug, but if they're having a hard time, just resting a hand on the shoulder, pat on the leg, and it can be any one of a number of things that are just moving past that barrier for them. I find this one challenging. I have a very large personal bubble. And it's only people I trust very much that are coming close to that personal bubble. I'm quite happy to give a hug, shake a hand and stuff like that, but if there are people who are just too close all the time, I find it really disarming. And that can be something to look out for as well. All these different love languages have the sort of the other side of the coin. So for physical touch, if somebody doesn't have physical touch as their primary love language, it can be something that is actually down at the bottom. It means that physical touch can be really, and we see this with a lot of autistic people, they don't like physical touch. I see this come up a lot. I've got a number of autistic friends, and in the group I run on Facebook, we have a number of autistic members, and a number of them will say, it's just not something, we don't do physical touch. Well, no, we don't, we don't do hugs. I don't understand that, and I don't want anything to do with it. So knowing that it's actually something that's going to have the opposite effect, it can be really valuable as well, and it really does make a big difference, because if you're showing someone who doesn't appreciate physical touch, that physical touch, it may be your primary love language, and that's how you're naturally showing it. But if it's being received in the wrong way, then it's having the adverse effect. My kids both love hugs. My daughter less so now, and I've learned to let her come to me. If she wants a hug, she'll come to me and she'll let me know she wants that hug. If I want to hug her too soon, we get this after meltdowns. If I go in too soon and say, come here and give me a cuddle, it's an important moment, but if I rush it, if I go in too soon, it has the opposite. In fact, it can lead into a relapse of the meltdown. And that can be obviously is a real negative. You don't want that to happen. But by the same token, when the moment's right and I give my daughter a hug, she knows it. She knows it's the right thing, and she will come to me when she wants to have a hug. And she tends to do it at night. She'll get out of bed and come down. The kid thing where they're sort of, I'm not tired. And she'll walk through the living room, but she'll always come over and give me a hug at that time. And it's actually a really special moment. My son, physical touch is very high up on his love languages, and he loves a cuddle, and he will come up and give me cuddles all the time. And in fact, he'll get upset if he senses that I'm not giving him a cuddle for some reason. It can be quite draining sometimes, but it's a wonderful thing. Who doesn't love their kids giving them a cuddle? So physical touch is a really easy one to portray to somebody you can see their love language is physical touch, and that's a really easy one that you can reciprocate with. Likewise, the other side of the coin, if it's their physical touch is right at the bottom, it's going to likely have the opposite effect. So being able to recognise this person isn't going to want that. In fact, it's not going to help. Then looking for the right primary love language to approach them with is going to make a big difference to how you get through a situation. So they are the 5 love languages, and I made the point there, and it's a really important point to hit home on. Whatever the primary love language is of the person that you're communicating with, so whatever your child's primary love language is, take note of what they aren't as well, because using them incorrectly can actually show the opposite of what you're wanting to do. And sometimes it's really challenging, because you might have a primary love language. If your primary love language is physical touch, and their love language is that's right at the bottom, the physical touch can have a really negative effect. Likewise with gift giving, some people can find it really awkward to receive gifts, and if your primary love language is gift giving, you're going to naturally want to do that, recognizing that somebody isn't going to respond the best way to that, and looking for what the primary love language is can make a big difference. And it just changes the dynamic of things. And we're all going to show our love language through our primary love language to other people naturally first. Being able to be aware of what other people's love languages are is what this is all about. And knowing what your kids' love languages are is just so key for them growing up feeling. We discussed in a number of episodes now the intrinsic link between autism and anxiety. A lack of love is always going to cause a huge anxiety. Knowing that you're loved is going to help contain that anxiety to some degree. Being able to express to your child you are loved in a way that they understand it in their primary love language will really make a difference. I highly recommend reading the book The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. It's available on Amazon. There's a website which I will put up at the end as well. In fact, I'll put it right here now. Go and have a look at it. It is really, really interesting stuff. There's so much more that can be learned from it, and so much more to each of these things. I've really given a bit of a haphazard sort of plod through what they are and how they relate. But it makes a big difference and can be a huge thing for your kids. So that's the 5 love languages in a very nutshell presentation. I'd love to hear your feedback. Any comments you can make, let me know how you've been able to express your primary love language to others, how you've been able to use their love languages back with them. Situations where you found that's really helped with your kids. Fantastic. Please do leave a comment. Please like this video. It really helps to just get it out there more and more. And please do subscribe to the channel. It makes a huge difference to, again, how this gets out there and the people that see it. And I really want these things to be something that reach the people whose ears need to hear them and they can be encouraged. So that's it for this episode, and I will see you next time.